They say mirrors remember what we try to forget. In the quiet corners of our homes, they hang silently, holding reflections, holding moments. But what if they held something more? What if, in the dead of night, they didn't just show you what was there, but what was waiting? Imagine this: a long, dark corridor. The only light comes from a single dying bulb overhead, casting a weak, flickering glow. As you walk forward, the air grows heavy, cold. The silence is broken only by the faint rhythmic sound of dripping water somewhere in the distance. Your bare feet pad across cracked, cold tiles. Each step is slow, hesitant, as if you're being drawn towards something you can't quite see. You stop in front of an old, tarnished mirror, and that's when you notice it. A flicker of movement. Your reflection. It's lagging, just half a second behind your own motions. You raise a hand, and it follows, but just a fraction too late. A trick of the light, you tell yourself. It has to be. The dying bulb, the shadows playing games with your mind. You lean closer, your breath fogging the glass, trying to make sense of the illusion. As the fog clears, your heart freezes, the face staring back at you. It's yours, but it's smiling. A slow, knowing smile that doesn't reach the eyes, but you're not smiling. A single distorted piano note hangs in the air, stretching the moment into an eternity. You stumble back, your breath catching in your throat, a frantic pulse hammering in your ears. From over your shoulder, you watch in frozen horror as your reflection tilts its head, but it tilts it the wrong way, an unnatural, impossible angle. A deep, primal part of your mind screams. You know, with a chilling certainty that settles deep in your bones, that the thing in the mirror, it isn't you anymore. The room suddenly feels smaller, the walls closing in, suffocating you. The light flickers violently now, threatening to plunge you into total darkness. And then you hear it, a sound that will haunt your nightmares. A soft, distinct knock. Tap, tap, tap. It's not coming from the hallway, it's coming from the other side of the mirror, from inside the glass. Your eyes are locked on the reflection. Its lips are moving, forming words you can't hear, yet you understand them perfectly. The silent plea echoes in your mind. Let me out. You're paralyzed, frozen in a state of pure terror. Your eyes are wide, trembling, reflecting the horrifying scene before you. You begin to back away, your hands shaking uncontrollably. You realize the mirror wasn't just showing you something. It was calling to you. It wanted you. Behind your reflection, the shadows on the wall begin to ripple and shift, twisting like living things, coalescing into something dark and vast. With a sudden, explosive pop, the light bulb above bursts, shattering the fragile light and plunging the room into absolute, suffocating darkness. In that split second of blackness, you hear the sharp crack of glass and your own short, strangled gasp. For an instant, a flash of deep red light illuminates the room, and you see it. Your reflection. It's stepping closer from inside the mirror, its hand reaching forward, almost touching the surface. A scream builds in your throat, a raw, primal sound of terror, but it dies before it can escape your lips. Silence swallows it whole. When you can see again, when your eyes adjust to a faint, ghostly light you can't source, the world has tilted on its axis. The perspective is wrong. The terror is still there, but it's different. Muted. You look out, and you see a figure standing in the room, its back to you, its shoulders shaking with silent sobs. It's you. You're not the one outside anymore. You are now the reflection. You are the one trapped inside the glass, watching helplessly. Outside, the figure that wears your face slowly turns, a cold, triumphant smile spreading across its lips. It stands motionless, just watching you from its newfound freedom. The only sound is a faint, static hum that buzzes at the edge of hearing. Your palms press against the cold, unyielding surface of the glass, a silent plea for an escape that will never come. You see, whatever looked back from the mirror that night, it never looked away again. Stories like this remind us that some doors are best left unopened, and some reflections are best left unwatched. Thank you for joining me in the shadows tonight. If you enjoyed this journey into the dark, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell, because you never know what's waiting on the other side. Stay safe, and whatever you do, don't look too closely in the mirror. Emily's apartment felt wrong now. Quiet, too still, as if the air itself was holding its breath. The mirror in her living room stood there like a doorway left ajar, its surface dull, heavy with shadows. Trapped inside that glass, the real Emily pressed her hands against the cold surface, watching as her reflection, now walking freely in her place, moved through her world with an eerie, unnatural calm. Outside, the reflection smiled. It cooked breakfast, even hummed softly, perfectly mimicking the life it had stolen. But every sound felt a little off, every movement just a little too smooth, as if something was learning to be human by memory alone, without a soul to guide it. Days bled into one another. Friends called, and the reflection answered with words that sounded right but carried no warmth, no life. Her voice had an echo now, a hollowness that people couldn't explain but left them feeling deeply uneasy. From her glass prison, the real Emily watched, trying to scream, to warn them, but her voice was swallowed by the suffocating silence. At night, when the reflection slept, Emily saw her own body breathing peacefully in her bed. Meanwhile, she stood awake on the other side, a ghost trapped behind the eyes of her own image. A terrifying realization began to dawn on her. The mirror wasn't showing her a reflection anymore. It was holding her. It was her cage. Then, things got stranger. The reflection started drawing shapes on the fogged bathroom mirror after a shower, intricate circles and lines that Emily had never seen before, symbols she didn't understand. Sometimes it would pause mid-sentence, tilt its head, and smile at another reflection, maybe in a window or a polished spoon, as if speaking to someone unseen. Emily realized with a jolt of ice-cold fear that the mirror wasn't just a prison, it was a passage. Something else was there with her on the other side, watching both worlds. The lights in the apartment began to flicker erratically. The reflection started avoiding the mirror altogether, eventually covering the one in the living room with a thick sheet. It would whisper to itself when it passed, as though the glass could hear its secrets. Emily's panic mounted, a silent scream building in her chest. The more she pushed against her prison, the colder the mirror became, like pressing her hands against a block of frozen metal. One night, a soft knock echoed through the silent apartment. It didn't come from the door, it came from inside the mirror. The reflection turned slowly, its eyes fixed on the shrouded frame. On both sides of reality, Emily felt her heart pound against her ribs. With a slow, deliberate movement, the reflection reached out and pulled the sheet away. The surface of the mirror shimmered faintly. Emily saw her own face staring back, but this time, her eyes looked ancient, as if something else had been living inside them for a very, very long time. The reflection spoke, its voice soft, almost kind. "You wanted to be seen, didn't you?" The words vibrated through the glass, and for a terrifying moment, Emily thought she felt the mirror breathe. She instinctively tried to step back in fear, but her reflection in the room stepped forward. The two movements were no longer opposite. They were perfectly synchronized. The boundary between inside and outside had thinned to a whisper. Suddenly, the apartment lights dimmed to almost nothing, and the sound of slow, steady breathing filled the air, coming from everywhere at once. The reflection reached out, its fingers brushing the glass, leaving faint ripples across the surface like disturbing still water. Desperate, Emily reached back. The world twisted. For one blinding, dizzying instant, she was both inside and outside, two selves colliding in a single, fragile heartbeat. Then, silence. When the morning light filtered through the windows, the mirror stood uncovered again. The reflection looked ordinary now, Smiling, brushing her hair, feeding the cat, everything seemed normal, almost peaceful. But the neighbors noticed something different in Emily's eyes when they saw her next. They said she stared a little too long at shiny surfaces. Windows, puddles, even the screens of their phones, as if checking to make sure her reflection was still following her movements correctly. And sometimes, at night, those who looked closely could see a second shadow moving behind her, perfectly aligned, perfectly silent. A ghost in her own footsteps. Inside the mirror, far in the cold, gray depths of the reflection's world, another figure could sometimes be seen when the light hit just right. Her lips moved soundlessly, a desperate, silent warning repeated for eternity. Don't look at her reflection. Thank you so much for joining me on this chilling journey. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more tales from the shadows. Stay safe and always be careful what you see in the mirror. Have you ever stared into a mirror for so long that your own face starts to look unfamiliar? Have you ever felt that unsettling chill, as if the person staring back isn't quite you? That's where our story begins, in a house wrapped in an unnatural quiet, as if the entire world outside had stopped breathing. Inside, a young woman stood before an old, cracked mirror. The silence was so deep she could hear her own heartbeat, a frantic drum against her ribs. She'd been drawn to this mirror before, but tonight was different. The faint, distorted reflection staring back at her wasn't mimicking her movements. It was smiling, a slow, knowing, and deeply unsettling smile. It was a smile that suggested it knew a secret, a terrible secret she was about to learn. Her hand, trembling, began to rise, reaching for the cold surface of the glass. She wanted to touch it, to prove it was real, solid, but the reflection moved first. Its hand shot forward faster than hers and slammed against the inside of the mirror. A dull thud echoed in the silent room. She froze, her breath catching in her throat. Behind her, the lights in the room began to flicker erratically. Each bulb buzzed with a rising static, casting long, distorted shadows that writhed and danced on the walls. The air grew heavy, thick with a palpable, unseen presence. It felt like drowning, but in an ocean of pure dread. And then, a whisper. A soft, chilling whisper that seemed to crawl out of the mirror itself. You shouldn't have looked back. Her body went rigid, every muscle locked in place, her feet feeling as though they were nailed to the floorboards. She tried to scream, but no sound came out. She was a prisoner in her own body. The reflection tilted its head, its movements fluid and mocking. It began to mimic her past expressions, a laugh from a forgotten memory, a look of surprise, a tear she'd cried weeks ago. It was like watching a ghost play back the highlights of her life. Then the reflection blinked, and the room was plunged into absolute darkness. For a terrifying moment, the only sound was her own ragged, shallow breathing. It was the sound of pure panic. And then, a giggle. It wasn't hers. It wasn't even human. It was high-pitched, like splintering glass, and it seemed to come from everywhere at once, resonating from within the mirror. With a surge of adrenaline, she fumbled for her phone, her fingers barely able to activate the flashlight. The beam sliced through the oppressive blackness, her hand shaking so badly that the light trembled. It landed on the mirror. But the reflection, it was gone. The glass was empty, just her own flashlight's glare bouncing back into her terrified eyes. She was alone. Or so she thought. Slowly, within the circle of light, a figure began to form. It started as a faint outline, then coalesced into something solid. Pale skin, stretched taut over sharp bones. Eyes that were too wide, too dark. A smile that was too sharp, filled with too many teeth. Her reflection was returning, but it was no longer her. It was a monstrous caricature, a nightmare wearing her face. She stumbled backward, her legs giving way as her back hit the cold wall. "Stop this!" she finally screamed, her voice cracking with terror. The creature in the mirror mimed her words, its mouth moving in perfect, silent synchrony. Then it raised its hand and pressed its palm flat against the glass. The surface didn't break. It rippled like the surface of a disturbed pond. And then a hand broke through. It wasn't a hand of flesh and blood. It was made of shimmering glass and solidified shadow, sharp and crystalline. It cut through the air as it reached for her, its fingers twitching. She screamed and fell to her knees, scrambling backward, hot tears blurring her vision. The mirror hand clawed at the floor, dragging its grotesque body out of the portal. A second hand followed. Then the face. Her face, but twisted, broken. The eyes glowed with a faint malevolent light, and as it smiled, new cracks spiderwebbed across its cheeks like shattered porcelain. "You wanted to see me," the reflection whispered, its voice a symphony of scraping glass and dry leaves. "Now, you will never look away." The girl screamed, a raw, primal sound of pure horror. She grabbed a heavy blanket from her bed and threw it over the mirror, hoping to smother the apparition. But the fabric was sucked in, disappearing into the glass as if pulled by a vacuum. The entire house began to shake violently, the walls groaning as if they were resisting this intrusion from another reality. She ran for the door, her only escape, but it slammed shut with a deafening boom just as she reached for the handle. The whisper followed her, slithering into her ear. One reflection, one life. A new kind of cold seized her, this time from the inside out. It wasn't paralysis, it was erasure. Her body froze as the reflection stepped completely out of the mirror, standing fully in her room. It blinked, its head tilting with a childlike curiosity, as if it had just been born into this world. Behind it, the mirror began to change. It didn't crack or shatter. It began to fade, the reflective surface turning into a dull, lifeless gray slab. The real girl gasped, her hand clutching her chest. Her body felt hollow, impossibly light, almost transparent. She looked down at her hands and watched in horror as they began to fade, her legs dissolving into a shimmering mist. Her very essence was being undone. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely a breath, but her reflection only smiled. It stepped closer and gently brushed a stray strand of hair behind her ear, a familiar, comforting gesture that was now the cruelest violation. "I told you not to look," it whispered. With one final, silent scream that was trapped in her throat, the girl vanished into the air, leaving nothing behind but the lingering scent of ozone and fear. The room was still again. The reflection, now the only version of her left, turned toward the door, adjusted its hair in a non-existent mirror, and smiled a perfect, human smile. The lights flickered back on. The mirror on the wall stood whole, clear, and perfectly calm, as if nothing had ever happened. Morning came. A new day dawned. The creature that now wore her face made breakfast. It hummed a cheerful tune as it cleaned the table. It even opened the window to let the warm morning light stream in. For a moment it paused, looking at its own reflection in the window pane. And there, for just a fraction of a second, another face could be seen. Trapped behind the glass, the real girl's face appeared, her mouth open in a silent, eternal scream, her eyes wide with desperation. But with a blink, the image was gone. The creature, the new her, looked into the mirror on the wall one last time, a satisfied grin spreading across her stolen features. She leaned in close and whispered to her own perfect reflection. Finally, she looked away.